Hi, everyone. Welcome to the GoldFish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. Today is March 27th, 2018, and we have a very special interview that I told our viewers about earlier in the week. We have a returning friend of the GoldFish Report, our friend Rob Potter from thepromiserevealed.com. How are you, Rob?
I'm wonderful. It's an honor to be here again with you.
It's always a pleasure, Rob. And we have a very special guest who will be appearing at and presenting at Rob's conference this summer at Mount Shasta. This is Dr. Raymond Keller, PhD of history, author, researcher, and study paranormal researcher since 1967. A very, very extensive background, which I will let him do the honors to explain to our viewers. But welcome to the GoldFish Report. And of course, you suggested we call you Cosmic Ray because that's what everybody calls you. So welcome to the GoldFish Report, Cosmic Ray.
Well, thank you, Louisa, and thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here and to share this information with you and the audience.
So I'm just going to use Ray for short right now, and I just wanted to ask you to give a little bit more background to our viewers about your research, how you started studying. I mean, with a PhD in history, how do we go from there to being a Venusian contactee, which he also is a Venusian contactee? So I know we're missing a whole bunch of paragraphs in the middle here. So can you fill this in for our viewers and give us a little bit of background, how we came to this point, where you started in with your history, and how you came to this point, and of course meeting Rob?
Yes, back in 1967, in the summer of '67, I was with a friend at a scout camp out, and we were coming back home and walking under a railroad trestle, and about 1,000 feet overhead was a large disc-shaped object, and later learned that it was a Venusian scout craft, and there was a story done about it in the National Enquirer, and there's a copy of it that appears in the Venus 2 book, Rockets to Venus. And this article brought a lot of attention to us because we were publishing a UFO newsletter or a magazine called the Flying Saucer Report, and it was financed by $30 from Earl J. Neff, who was the director of the Cleveland Ufology Project. And
that's funny. I'm sorry, was this in Cleveland where you saw this?
Yes,
this disc?
in
Okay.
a suburb of Cleveland. It's actually in Walton Hills, to the southeast of Cleveland.
Interesting.
And well, it attracted international attention, and we began to exchange publications and information with Gray Barker in Clarksburg, West Virginia, Jean Duplantier up in Canada, Coral and Jim Lorenzen in Arizona, and Gabriel Green out in Southern California. And then our subscription base continued to grow, and we had more and more contacts throughout the ufology universe, UFO Research Queensland in Australia, and Viewfora in England, and it just kept growing like a snowball effect. And so this is how I got into this fascination with flying saucers and ufology and all things paranormal.
Very good. I think an experience like that would certainly, change your perspective and certainly get you, in the quest. I guess it's a quest, isn't it, to kind of find the answers, isn't it?
It's a quest, and this was a time during the Vietnam War and everything, and I went into the Navy, and from 1972 to 76, and because of my experience in journalism, I was, beside publishing the Flying Saucer Report, I was the editor of my school paper, the Bedford Times. It's the Fourth Estate, and then I worked at the local newspaper, the Bedford Times Register. So when I was in the Navy, I got to work with the Miramar Naval Air Station Jet Journal as an editor there. So that was exciting. And then later on, after that, I worked for the telephone company out in California. And then after that, went into the Army after things had settled down, and became a voice intercept operator in the Spanish language. So I traveled all throughout Latin America and other parts of the world as well. And all the while, I kept my interest in UFOs and UFO research, and kept up my contacts, although I wasn't allowed to publish anything. And then 1987, I got out, and I was heading up a group called OSIRIS, Outer Space International Research and Investigation Society, out in California. I was living in Hillmar, California, and our subscription base quickly went up. We had 7,000 subscribers. This is pre-internet days, and had many wonderful experiences up there on Mount Shasta, where Rob is at, and it's been just exciting adventure ever since. I went to the College of Santa Fe to get my teacher certification in Spanish and bilingual multicultural education, and I taught classes, directed a bilingual multicultural education program with students from 35 countries, and I had over 435 students. And our publication, The New Millennial Star, went global, and I've been just doing this ever since.
When did you, now you said that you're a contactee, when did you start with the, or when did you know that you were receiving either contact or information or some kind of communication? When did with Venusians, of course, this is who your contact was with? Yes.
Yes, out in California in 1972, being active with the Amalgamated Flying Saucer Clubs of America, I met some contactees out there through Gabriel Green, and then I kept up my contacts from the Flying Saucer Report, and so I met many individuals from other planets and even other star systems. By 1987, I had taken a tour to Mount Shasta with our chapter from Salt Lake City. We were going to Mount Shasta with Reverend Clayton Parker, and he was a friend and associate of Annalise Guerin. And Anna Lee became a very famous mystic, and had been translated, or I guess you'd say today that she was ascended, became an ascended master and went to Venus. But anyway, she came and appeared to us and announced that her name was now Lady Ankara, and she was there to answer our questions about flying saucers, and that she knew why we were there. So she told us many wonderful things, and after about 3 hours, she let us take her picture with our group. There were 8 of us up there, and what happened then is we were all excited because we were huddled around, and she was in the middle, and And this picture was taken, and then by Kay Studstrup. She's a member of the group. And we held the UFO meetings at her house back in Murray, Utah. But when we got back and developed the film, we were all in it, but Lady Ankara wasn't.
Wow, that's
It's
interesting.
like the light just went right through her, and it was, and then that's when we knew that we were really onto something special. And then these kind of events just sort of escalated after that for all the members of the Osiris group, not just our small contingent that went there to Mount Shasta.
So so these were, but you seem to have a connection, a very strong connection. You're the author of 3 books on Venus, entitled the Venus Conspiracy. Is that correct?
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rob?
I'd like to share a few things. Raymond has such a long history and storied career. He's lived in 44 countries, and he's been a translator, worked for the government and stuff. But throughout the history, he is a professor, and he is an archivist. He has a grand historical knowledge, and I love it. He says, we started with funding of $30.
I know. I said.
So he was very young when the Inquirer, I think he was 17 or 18. So he was has been a lightning rod for information and contact. He's checking out Howard Menger, and he has tremendous historical stuff he can share with you today, some of it. Now, some of it is really beyond belief, but we had talked about on your show with Winston about Annalise Scarron. She was the woman that spoke in the church and was kind of excommunicated, and then she had actually had a witness where she had been in an orb sphere, which is called a nimbus. And this is probably coming to part 2 of the show here, but Norman's experience there was that he was told they would meet a space person, Mount Shasta. And if you remember, I talked about the porthole from Sirius, because she's actually from Venus, but she was doing a mission in the Bellicourt system, and he'll share about that. But he said they could see these kind of mantis beings in the background, kind of climbing on the mountain, right, Ray?
Yes, that's right. And back in New Mexico, I went when I was going to the College of Santa Fe. I did a program on UFOs and was interviewed by a paper there, and they published an article that contained some of that information. And I saw that it was picked up. Our encounter on Mount Shasta was picked up on a book by Alberto Rosales, I think. It was in there. Well, just a brief mention, but it was in there.
But what there was a portal, and they weren't actually on the mountain. They were there, but this woman plays another role in his life later. He meets her in another location in his books, and I'll let him get into that. But he has a tremendous archive of historical information. And when he, went to Venus and looked at the Akashic records and stuff, the ice caves under Pluto, such fascinating information.
Okay, we'll get there. Well, that's great, Rob. I appreciate, because you have a little bit more background information on Ray. So it's like you're co-hosting with me, Rob. That's wonderful. That's great. No, because you have this information, so you know what to bring out, and that's really great. And we'll get to that. So it is called Venus Rising Trilogy. So let me correct myself on that. But I wanted to just ask, for the viewers, I wanted to give them an idea of how you became connected with Venusians, how you became so knowledgeable about the Venusian Society, and that you've actually said, now I'm not quite sure if you've physically been there. Have you astrally traveled there? And so if you could just give us an idea how you became connected, because there's some people who are very connected to Pleiadians and some people who are very connected to Andromedans. And, so I just wanted to know, how did is it just that's who you were exposed to, and they just develop from there. But I tend to think these are not coincidence. So go ahead.
Oh yes, it's not coincidental, and I don't believe that there are any such things as coincidences, and that when we're on the right track to something, that the synchronicities will mount up in our life, and that's kind of like the hot cold thing, you know, that and you know, you're getting warmer, you're getting warmer. So anytime these synchronicities happen, that's the way the universe is telling you, well, you're definitely going in the right direction. And that's kind of how I experienced it. I began by after sighting this flying saucer to start a UFO library, and I was getting everything I could read. And I started off with the books by George Adamski. He wrote a trilogy of books about flying saucers. So I started with those. And then Howard Menger's book, From Outer Space to You, and Connie Menger's book, My Saturnian Lover, and these other books. Edward J. Ruppelt's book. My screen just went blank here. Let's see if I can recover it.
You're okay on this end. We still see you.
Oh,
It's all
okay, very
good.
good.
It's all good. I mean, because I think some people think in terms of, for those who, I always have to keep in mind the different levels of people who come and view Goldfish Report. There's viewers who have, been exposed to people who, like Rob as a contactee, and other people, Cobra and so forth. And I've had someone on, I've interviewed someone by the name of Audrey Ewis, who was from New Lira, who actually crashed here and was here for some time. But a lot of people tend to think of contactee like the Betty and Benny Hill case.
Oh yes, the Betty and Barney Hill
Barney,
case.
I'm sorry, Barney Hill, right?
Yes, that's very, very, very interesting. Of course, that's in the realm of abduction. It's
Right.
an abduction scenario, whereas the contactees, just to clarify for the listeners,
Sure.
and the viewers, is that the contactees are those who have communicated with extraterrestrials on one platform or another, but in a friendly context. There was no coercion or violation of my will or the will of any of the contactees, so far as I know.
Okay, well, I appreciate you clarifying that for the viewers, because I wanted to make sure there's going to be people, like I said, at different levels of exposure to these subjects, and I wanted to make sure that there was that distinction, that we're not talking about an abduction here. But so the kind of contacts that you were having, could you, as time evolved and as you amassed all this knowledge and history about Venus and the Venusian Society, what were your contacts like? Could you give our viewers a little idea of what it was like?
Oh yes. Well, the Venusians, for the most part, except for a few small things that you can't really notice except for close up, they look very much like we do, and live and work among us. And so you've probably met some Venusians many times and just unaware of it. I know that the great mystic Rumi, the Sufi mystic back in the 13th century, had said that at any time on the earth there's about 4,000 angelic beings that are carrying on their mission to help advance humankind to a level of higher awareness and higher consciousness. And I sort of equate angels and aliens, just as the late Billy Graham had said in his book, Angels, Messengers, or Angels was Messengers of God, or God's Secret Agents. He said on page 21 that he believed that angels and aliens were one and the same thing. So I agree with him there, and And it kind of goes along with that scripture in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2 that says, always be kind to one another, to strangers, for know ye not that ye entertain angels unawares. And so I feel the same way toward our Venusian friends.
That's very lovely. I'm getting goosebumps on my, I'm sure I have met a few angels. I actually know a few, I think. And, and it is lovely. So it is interesting. So did you wonder why they were contacting you? What was the mission specifically? Did you have a specific role to play in this mission of theirs?
Well, after I read my aunt in Los Angeles, she lived in the Crenshaw district. She gave me a book about the solar system when I was very young. And I always wondered whether there's life on these planets, even in our own solar system. And then when I read George Adamski's books and Howard Menger's books, I said, yeah, this is for real. I feel that this is for real, and I have to follow this up and pursue it. And the more I did, the more I got. I followed into, like as you were mentioning about the rabbit hole.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I kind of fell into, a rabbit hole, if so to speak, and discovered many amazing people and events that I don't regret, because it took my life on such a dramatic course that I probably packed into this life enough adventures to fill up 5 other ones.
Yeah, I think so. We're going to hear a little bit more about this. I wanted to screen share a little bit of the information that Rob had sent me, and unless Rob has that link, Rob, the email. I don't, for some reason I can't open my email at the moment, which is interesting. But these things happen sometimes, Ray, during our interviews. It's not uncommon. I wanted to ask you though. So the goal was, because of Rob really kind of brought Omnek Onek, who was a Venusian contact, who was very public about, her purpose here and her life here. And so Rob, let me just ask Rob that, in terms of Omnek Onek, what was her position in terms of her mission here? How was her...
Well, with Omnek, the mission was to, of course, continue to allow people to realize the truth. And the truth has been hidden from us, and consciously we know all this. And Ray has tremendous information in his books. But Omnek's mission, the masters asked her, one was for her own karmic mission to finish up her last lifetime on the physical plane on Earth. And she was told she'd go through hardship. She looked like a 7-year-old girl, but she was 120 years old at that point or more. So her mission was they also wanted to study, because she is in a higher density or the 4th dimensional astral plane, to lower her vibrations through a process of mantras, which her and her uncle did, and they became to the physical plane. They wanted to see how a physical plane body that had come down would deal with Earth things, and of course to be her natural self. And she has no inside intel or anything the government can use. She's very non-technological. She's just a sweetheart, and she can talk about what life is like from the astral plane. We can actually have a real person. Some people will poo-poo it, of course, that's always going to happen, but that's what her mission was. I want to say another thing about Ray is Gabriel Green. He met the Queen of Venus. I mean, he's kind of talking about some of the stuff, but he has amazing experiences in the future of his life, despite just meeting this one person. So I'm really happy and honored to share his stuff. If you want, I can take us real quick to the 2 Women from Venus article.
I think what I want to do,
When you're ready.
we'll go to that shortly. Okay, I just opened up my email, which is good, but I'll get to it in a minute. Um, let me just ask Ray, because we, you know, the government hasn't been honest, NASA hasn't been honest. I mean, there were how many, 40 something probes sent to Venus? I mean, and they're still trying to convince us there's nothing there. But, I mean, do they really think we're going to be, sheep forever?
Um, well, they know that the time is growing short,
Yeah.
and but they still have their own agenda to work out here, and um, as long as they can throw up roadblocks, I imagine that they'll continue to do so. But I feel that part of my work involves bringing to light this information to the public. So in all my Venus books, whenever I come across the actual information that has been discovered or hidden, such as through the Project White Stork or other secret operations, I'll bring it out and publish it so that
Okay.
people can read it and determine for themselves that who's telling the truth.
Okay. And in terms of the truth, this is interesting because what is the truth about Venus? Is it too hot to live? Can we sustain air? Is there an atmosphere on Venus? What is the truth as you understand it?
Yes. Well, I just published a series of articles with thepromiserevealed.com with Rob's site called "The Vast Venus Conspiracy," and I look at some of the factors that are involved there about the atmosphere, the dynamics of the atmospheric currents, the vortices, the dual vortices over the polar regions that serve as a sort of planetary air conditioning system, the true nature of the atmospheric layers and boundary layers, um, photos of Venus that show what looks like a form of life, and then another that shows some kind of moss or vegetation in the background. And so even some of the information, because it's coming from so many different probes, enough of it seeps through that we could put the puzzle together and start to understand. And then we have scientists that come forth in many countries, in Russia, in the United States, in Canada, Australia, Europe, European countries, um, revealing the truth about Venus, and they're not afraid to come out and say so about what they've discovered. And so this is all very important, I feel, because, well, when we started to explore the New World, to send ships from Europe across the Atlantic Ocean to a new world here. At first, they didn't know if there was anything over here, and everybody said, well, if there's anything there, that's probably be hazardous, hazardous currents, and the ship will fall off the edge of the world, or it's just too much of just a great expanse of nothingness, just endless ocean, that you die before you ever got to the other end to reach Chipango, to reach China and Japan. And maybe it's the same thing that we're finding out today, because, well, back in those days of discovery and Columbus and that, pieces of driftwood would show up in the Azores and on the coast of Spain or the west coast of Africa and the Mali Kingdom, and they'd see that these are intricately carved statues, and they didn't resemble anything known, and they were coming from Central America. And there's the great empires of the Maya and the Aztec, and they were right under our noses, and we didn't even know it. So I think in this age of discovery now, the same kind of thing is happening. We have a vast, wonderful civilization, utopian, paradisical world that's only 26 million miles away at its closest approach. And it's right there if we want it. But if we were to truly understand about it and be in open communications with Venusians, I think all of our world systems, economic, political, military, religious, would just start to crumble. Just as when the civilizations in the South Pacific, Asia, or the Americas came into contact with the European imperialists, the same kind of thing happened. It's their civilizations deteriorated, and their way of life, in many cases, completely vanished. So I think that they fear that, but the Venusians, unlike the conquistadors of old, don't have bad intentions toward us, and for that reason, they hesitate to make their presence known.
There's a mixed, it's difficult, I would imagine, because there are many people who are on Earth that I think are not, that have their own agenda, clearly, and they might not be friendly to visitors, people who are trying to come. I mean, we know the story of Valiant Thor. So Rob, you have a lot of information about Valiant Thor. We know that he was I would say, I guess, a guest at the Pentagon and lived there for what number of years, 3 or 5 years, something like that, Rob. And yeah, go ahead.
He was given information, of course, to offer officially to the world government, so that, at their time of denial, that, they would again now become accountable. I think if we look at what Raymond's talking about here, and as you said, it's very possible that the old ancient maps that some of the hierarchies of the church had known about the earth, maybe even directed Columbus, they possibly knew, or maybe it was just one man's undying curiosity and courage to go. But there definitely now is a silence group, which is very difficult to comprehend for most people. I think they're getting their minds around it now, that a small group of individuals who control all of the world's satellites, and through a control system of corruption, they can hide the truth. But with people like Ray and Dr. We're hearing a ringing there. I'm not sure who that is. Oh, that's right.
We got 2 people's phones going off here. We should just
the way that the corruption is going is that people are getting a grasp that they can keep the secret by not doing it, but you have the internet, and they're trying to shut that down. But the truth is beyond any electronic digital thing. And I wanted to say that Raymond is very much like Lewis and Dr. Frank, very warm, very friendly, very unassuming, very kind, but chock full of amazing information.
I'm sure he'll share those photos at your conference too. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to share some of those photos today, but I do have some. Rob G just started your brand new newsletter on the Promise Revealed, so I know that you're getting that launched and looking for subscribers for that. In this information that you sent me, I will just screen share the first edition, and I wish you lots of luck with that.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's wonderful news. And so it's nice because you can always skim through newsletters, which we don't do, but it's good. It's always nice to have that. It looks here like you're saying that the NASA, so this is back to Ray, NASA has spent a huge amount of money. It looks like from your article here, 43 probes went to Venus that we know of at countless billions of dollars. Ray, why would they send all these probes to Venus? I mean, and then lie to us about it.
Oh yes, well, in all these articles, in 3 parts, and in each one I present facts about Venus that have managed to escape the filter process of the world space agencies. And when we piece them all together, we see a planet that's quite habitable and conducive to life, even as life as we know it. And you know, if Venus was that hellhole that people say it was, then why would they spend all this money and build all these probes to send there if there was nothing there, if it was just a waste of time?
Right, that's inconsistent. And then, according to this article as well, this was the problem that people who, and even engineers, even novice astronomers would, when they, I guess, when they would get the information back that NASA was releasing from these probes, that it just wasn't consistent with their observations. What kind of, what was inconsistent? What was it so hard to believe? How is it, in other words, were these astronomers really figuring out that there was a lot more here than met the eye?
Oh yes, well the probes that went there indicated an atmospheric pressure 93 times greater than that of the Earth, um, overbearing atmosphere of carbon dioxide and other noxious gases, um, self,
They,
sulfuric acid and metal, and even raining metal. And it just didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense, and some scientists began to question it because prior observations from the Earth, from telescopes and radar and spectroscopy and high-altitude balloon observations of Venus indicated the presence of water vapor and other phenomena related to the atmosphere and temperature that were conducive to life and completely opposed to the information that space agencies were putting out. And then when I discovered that the European Express Venus probe, Venus Express, and the Akatsuki probe from Japan and other investigations of the planet showed that that there were favorable conditions on Venus and making all these new discoveries, then I said, oh, this is the definite vindication of what George Adamski and these other contactees were saying in the 1950s. And this is what people need to know, because as long as they think that Venus, that there's nothing there, then they don't have any hope. And of course it is there. And when we look back into the history of human history and the evolution of consciousness on this planet, we see where all of the mystics and the prophets and poets and artists have been inspired by the planet Venus as a very lustrous muse out there in the solar system, and being the third brightest object in the sky, has been the subject of a lot of speculation and interest and investigation. So I write about Dante's Journey to Venus, Emanuel Swedenborg, and many others from centuries before, that Venus is truly an angelic realm.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think they were reporting, what, 800-degree temperature on the surface of Venus. This is according to NASA. Is that right? Something like that.
Yes, that's right.
Is that real? Is that true?
No.
So there's a
What
surface.
they were measuring essentially was electrical. There's electrical heat created in the ionosphere, and Venus is a planet with a supercharged electric field, and there's constantly lightning storms in the upper atmosphere. So it's a measurement of electrical heat if we
Good.
go above the Earth, we can measure temperatures of 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit as well,
Mm,
um, in the
nice.
ionization layer. So therefore, it's
It was a little
uh,
misleading. Yeah.
a little misleading.
Yeah, exactly. According to UNKNOWINGLY, I mean, she had said that that they had the problem there on Venus as well as you were explaining just a moment ago. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mean novice amateur astronomers. I meant amateur astronomers, which is not the same. But um, that apparently this cabal took control of Venus as well, and as according to her, everyone, once everyone realized what was happening, the whole civilization united and kicked them out. Now, what do you know? Can you tell us about that?
Oh yes. Yeah. Everything that she said and wrote about, I found to be quite accurate, and we found some similarities and some vindications of each other's work. In I was talking to her on the telephone with Rob, as we're both going to be there at that conference. And one of the things that she wrote about was that her village on Germany was founded by a German astronaut, as strange as that seems. And then I had some information that was passed on to me from some writers at the Weekly World News, the tabloid paper. But a lot of the things that appear in those papers are real. And I followed up on one story and proved that not only was this German astronaut real, but his name, his family, his history, where he went to school, who he worked with, what his missions were in World War II, and how he flew an experimental rocket ship, and his whole story there. But it just vindicates everything that Amnek Onik wrote about.
It's always great as a researcher to get that vindication. Those are exciting moments. But
Yes, yes. And then I have to say she acquitted herself very well. I've watched her appearance on the Jerry Springer show of all places back in 1993, and Jerry brought a bunch of scientists over there to try and trip her up. But despite the fact, she's not technically trained, but she held her own very well, I thought. And kudos to Omnet.
absolutely. I mean, that's kind of, I like those kinds of stories, really, when, the underdog kind of comes out the superhero at the end, so to speak. So,
Oh yes,
but,
yes, for
but this,
sure.
this gives rise to the next question, which is really, okay, so what kind of political structure or let's say governmental structure did they have, and what do they have now? Because it seems like was it very similar to Earth, where they were at one time able to be bought off and corrupted, and because all the politicians pretty much are, which is why we're in this mess. Because if somebody had the integrity to say I'm not doing this, of course when they did they were killed. So we didn't really have a choice anyway, which is really kind of a really very bad situation we were in. How did they? What kind of um, I mean, obviously, they don't have religion, do they? And what is their societal structure? How do they see
Yes,
themselves
they
and
don't have.
organize themselves? Yeah.
Yes, they don't have religions because they don't have to live by faith, because they see everything and are aware of everything for themselves. They live in an angelic realm, and they have frequent visitations from fifth dimensional beings who are the um, what we would call on Earth maybe ascended masters or saints. These holy beings that come from a higher, less dense, an etheric realm, and
Sure.
they frequently visit they frequently visit Venus, as well as other extraterrestrials from all throughout the galaxy. On Venus itself, there's 51 regions, and Venus is represented by a queen that's selected by the women of the planet, and there's also a regent that serves the queen, that's permanently in place.
Yeah, you hear that, ladies? The women only get to vote, and it's a queen who's elected.
And a region. Now, I did notice that. I did notice that. And it's not surprising, because I think you find in a lot of societies and a lot of that it's more of the wisdom of the women are the ones, even in indigenous cultures, you find they're the ones who, the males bring the supplies to the female, to the wife or spouse, and they build the teepee, and so it's their teepee, and if you're not acting right, out the teepee door you go. I mean, so it's that kind, it's very similar. So there's, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And there are many advantages to a matriarchal society. And of course, I don't know if you could see my little pin here. Let's see if oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's the bee.
Oh, the bee. So it's like a queen bee. Yeah. And you said bees
Right,
are very
right.
important to, you said bees are very important to society on Venus. Would you like to explain that?
Oh, yes. In my book, Venus Rising, that's the first one.
Oh, yes. Hold that up nice and still. Venus
And
rising. Oh, very lovely.
Ray's going to go back. He can go back 25 million years to, as Corey is reporting about the Norcans and how they came to Venus, and then the agreement they made, and actually some of the galactic wars with genetic engineering, and then moving forward, the bee has a very intimate, close association with Venus, and he has some awful artistry in another book he's working. He's not going to release it now. I saw it's amazing. The pictures in 1950 from some of the early contactees of the council. I forget where it is. The council on
it's on Neath. It's a cloak moon of Venus.
And they had blue sphere avians, and you see the real looks of these various beings. And anyway, you go ahead, talk with the history. I just wanted to lay that out there in his books and what we're going to be sharing at the conference.
Right.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you're going to get, I guess viewers will definitely get, I mean, anyone who goes to the conference will get a lot more detail about this. Obviously, we only have 2 hours here, but we're trying to give an overall, but it's very information packed here. So, right. So the matriarchal society, that's where I belong. Where is the next ride? I'm going.
Yes. Well,
What about their
what it
craft?
is that you know how the hive is ruled by a queen.
Right.
So right away we have that connection with the divine feminine. Then we have the Fibonacci number sequence, which is very important to the structure of a hive. For example, the number of bees in any hive is always going to be a Fibonacci number because of the way that bees reproduce themselves. And then we have the waggle dance of the bees, which is done in a grand spiral, which is the Fibonacci graph. When you graph it out, it's a Fibonacci number. And then the connections going back on the earth to the Roman emperors, the Merovingian kings, the Cathars, they all believe that their divine role was assigned by Lady Venus, who was identified with both the dove and the bee, and so they embroidered bees on all their robes and clothing and so forth, and the mystic connections of the Sufis with the bees. Rumi said they were brought to the earth from Venus, and this confirms what Helena Blavatsky had told the Theosophical Society when she wrote History of a Planet, which was the first book about Venus in a metaphysical sense and exploring it from that angle. And as a member of the Theosophical Society myself, I thought that, well, Helena Blavatsky wrote this book in wrote her History of a Planet in 1877. So I thought, well, I'll call my book Venus Rising, A Concise History of the Second Planet, to carry on in the tradition of Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society in presenting updated information about Venus, because a lot can happen in 130 years.
Oh, certainly can. Well, let me ask you something. What was the perspective? So, in terms of governance, then, so you have 51 regions. You have represented by a queen and also a regent. So then, what role do the men play on the planet other than? Well, I'll let you. I won't put any words in your mouth. Go ahead.
Dishes and laundry, primarily.
No,
Pardon?
the men are represented. The men are representative too, and they have a vote, and they participate in the structure of the government as well. But what was explained to me by Lady Ankara was about, like, she was coming back from the Venusian colony in the Sirius star sector on a world called Balaton, which is about 3 times the size of the Earth. And there in the Venusian colony, the matriarchal structure continues, and the women, they're the only ones that communicate telepathically with the other species on Balaton, including the mantids, because they can put their left hand on their forehead of the mantids and communicate telepathically with them, and they're the ones that open up the stargates to connect to other solar systems and planetary systems. So this gives the women an edge biologically, that they have this extra power, and some men have some telepathic abilities, but they're not as enhanced as the possessed by the Venusian women.
Okay, we do know that Valiant Thor did not have a, I know this is kind of coming out of nowhere, but it really isn't. He didn't have a navel. He did not have a belly button. So how do they reproduce there? Um, do they clone themselves? What is their
Yes, I
biology?
went into a detailed explanation of that in my second book, and I'll hold it up so people can see it.
Please do.
It's Rockets to Venus, Final Countdown, Rockets to Venus, like the song, by Europe, 1986 song, Final Countdown. And but they have incubation chambers, and people are born according to genetic matrix where they can fit best in society and aid the development of that society.
What about the souls?
Oh yes, well, they do believe in the same process of, uh, of reincarnation that exists everywhere else. For example, we know the second law of thermodynamics is that matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed.
Exactly.
And so the same pertains to the human soul, or the Venusian soul, or the Palladian soul, or the Syrian. It's all this. It's all the same. And my understanding is that in our solar system, beings go through 12 or 13 incarnations um, on our physical plane before they're ready to ascend to the next higher celestial orb.
Okay, there's something called the Mentana Archives. Are you familiar with that?
Not by that name, but if, you're referring to something like the Akashic Records, you mean?
Well, no, this was Winston Shrout presented this in one of our earlier reports. This was handed down by I believe, the Mayans for this time, and it's an archive. There's several. There's a series of them. There's several editions of them, and they're like allegories in a sense. They go through how souls are created and how they're, I guess, let's see. He put it in context of the new and everlasting covenant. So all these things kind of were related with regard to, um, let's see, the incarnation, how they choose to incarnate, and also like you have a frequency. The frequency has to match. Everyone has a unique frequency that has to match. So you have to incarnate into a body that has a frequency that matches, things like that. And also the law of restoration, which is like karma. So how do Venusians, what do Venusians think about karma? And have you heard of, it may go by many different names, but what about that whole cause and effect? Um,
Well, they believe that since we're constantly in a state of spiritual evolution, that at one point, in our life, when we reach an epiphany of a sort, that we can ascend above all of that, and also that the fact that at any time we can completely redeem ourselves in previous incarnations by simple acts of kindness.
Okay, we know that Christ refers to the Christ consciousness, but the person, the entity, the ascended master known as Jesus, was he a Venusian? Would you know?
Jesus is identified as with the planet Venus in Revelations chapter 22, verse 16, where Jesus says, I am the bright and morning star, the offspring of David. So we definitely see this connection, this connection to Venus in our solar system as being the higher sphere. But of course, the divine spark that's in all of us, Venusians or humans, humankind, or any other species, comes from a much higher source in a region beyond our space and time continuum that the Gnostics and the Greeks referred to as the pleroma. This is an angelic realm without end.
Yeah, I've heard of that before. Go ahead, Rob.
I'd like to bring in one thing. Valiant Thor and like Omna came from the interior of the higher plane. So as Raymond said, there are many different, just like we have little pygmies and different things, there are different relationships to different dimensions and planes. And Raymond has also mentioned that there's many other interdimensional planets within our solar system as well. So to understand this interdimensional communication, we're thinking very three-dimensionally and so forth. And one of the things about Valiant Thor that Dr. Frank says is that he was a created being, so he doesn't have a belly button. Now, I'm not sure about all Venusians and everything. He told me that they make love and have children individually as well. Maybe Raymond can clear that up from maybe the Lady Orda and the descendants of the bees, which I think you should go a little into the history of Tau Ceti and the Norkans, they're called, how they came here and what happened with the Vril Yaren a long, long time ago. It kind of sets up this bee relationship thing. I also want to mention one thing, the fleur-de-lis, which is actually comes from Saint Germain. In Manly P. Hall's book, the fleur-de-lis actually is shown to have evolved from a bee. So,
interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Well, thank you, Rob. Yes, there was a gentleman, Albert Coe, and he had some experiences in the 1920s with a flying saucer, a Dembski-type scout craft. And the pilot, his name was Rhett, and he was here on vacation, and he was just fishing, and I got caught in some crags in a rock, and Albert Coe had heard his cries for help and went to assist him, and then they struck up a lifelong friendship, and he became one of the earlier contactees. Not very well known, but it was revealed to him about the origin of humanoids on Venus coming from Tau Ceti, a planet in the Tau Ceti system called Norca. And countless millennia ago, they arrived to our solar system through a tunnel of light, and established a colony on Venus with the permission of the bees, which were the highest form of indigenous life there. And anyway, what happened after that is that after millions of years, there came other arrivals to the planet, these being from Aldebaran, a race called the Vril Yaren, because they were colonizers, explorers in space, but they took over the planet, enslaved the Norcons, and did genetic experiments on them, mixing them with the genes of the bees, the bee population.
Really?
And then, well, to make there's much more about it in all my books, in the Venus Rising, and also the Rockets to Venus, and then in my third book, Cosmic Ray's Excellent Venus Adventure. But rather than give it all away, all the information, I think the readers the listeners would enjoy actually reading these books
Certainly.
for themselves. And they have won awards in London and Southern California Festival of Books.
What is there any information that you have about crop circles? Are you familiar with?
Yes, yes. I show some pictures of crop circles that are related, that are based on the Fibonacci sequence, and offer the suggestion that the Venusians have left these here as a calling card.
Okay, so
And
okay,
so
so
I do have some of those.
okay. What about so you're saying that some of these were made by orbs, you didn't say orbs, you didn't say how they were made, but you're saying that they were left here as calling cards, or they were created here somehow. Did they go into that detail about the making of the crop circles?
Well, I didn't go into detail about that, other than to point out that in certain cases, there are indications in the symbols and the structure of the crop circles that they're of Venusian origin.
Oh, interesting. Because, I have interviewed the lovely Patti Greer on the GoldFish Report, and she, as you know, is an award-winning film producer, filmmaker of the crop circles. And what was very fascinating in one of the clips that one of the discoveries she made, was that these orbs, which were videotaped, that were laying down these, I guess to me it looked like cymatics, because it looked like it had to do with the vibration resonance. There always seems to be aquifers under these areas, and also granite, which may use the physics of the acoustics and the frequency, the resonance rather, of the planet to create these crop circles in a cymatic way. But she saw these two orbs, and she saw this binary code going between the two of them. Like it was like a split second, but she caught it. She's really good. And she caught this binary code of these two orbs communicating to each other, and that was just fascinating. And it's amazing that the UFO community seems to be, and I don't mean to paint everybody with a broad brush, but it just seems to be that at this stage of the game, they're really trying to suppress her information. And, you know, right or wrong, Patty's, you know, whether her hypothesis is that the Earth, Mother Earth, is creating these in some way. But you know, and that's she has her evidence for that, or her rationale for that. And I think a lot of people thought they were created by ETs initially.
They
So
are. They
yeah,
are, most of them. I have to say, there have been ships in the sky. The orbs come down. That's been photoed too. Maybe she doesn't have
yeah,
that evidence, but
yeah,
clearly, it's like, you know, you have a piece of sand there, and you look at it, it's just sitting there, and then I could magically take a magnet and go over it, and the iron would move, and you would call that magic. This is simply a higher technology. There is definitely information encoded in it. I appeared at a MUFON conference in 1991 with Colin Andrews, and he went very clearly into it that there's several things that cannot be replicated by, you know, he was set up by MI6 to discredit him. So Patti Greer is just the latest in a series of hits by the control forces. But he said that, first of all, you have these things, they're not crushed over, they are bent. And the
right,
structure is different. And it goes like this. There's a waveform that goes up and down like this. They intertwine like this. There's also certain elements possibly that are come up from the earth from the process. But there's definitely information. And, you know, clearly the nature spirits or the deviant kingdom are there. But and I can't speak for every crop circle, but I certainly think that the physical probes just aren't popping out of the natural Earth. These are actually sent from spaceships or possibly from inner Earth civilizations that are coming forward. So whatever that speculation is, there's information being given, like Judy Beebe, who has deciphered them. And if you go to her website, you can read their scientific and medical information about hydrogen and all kinds of information coming through these symbols, including astronomical and planetary movements and alignments representing different things.
yeah, and it appeared that that the crops that had these crop circles in it, they had a much higher yield. The crops had a higher yield. They had were like super seeds. The seeds that were left from this were like super seeds. Now, Ray, they're trying to show us something. They're trying to teach us something. Exactly, Rob. So there's messages in these crop circles, and there's new technology in there. And so it seemed like maybe Monsanto might have been behind, you know, suppressing her discoveries, because it's showing that by the use of by some mechanism, some function of these crop circles was in fact creating a higher yield in crop yield, and so it was they were even like super seeds when the seeds were left over. What do you know about that? And is this
Oh,
technology that this is what do we need this to feed the earth now? You know.
oh yes. There's a lot of information in the cryptic designs of crop circles, and our way of communication isn't necessarily the way of other intelligent life forms, that they can communicate entire concepts and ideas through a simple symbol. This is from Venus Rising. This is one of the pages in the section on bees.
Okay. Exactly. That's the Fibonacci sequence. Uh-huh.
Yes, that's a Fibonacci grand spiral or golden spiral. And then it's about the structure of the beehive and the Fibonacci, how it relates. And
Okay.
then I have a whole section on Tesla. Nikola Tesla was obsessed with the planet Venus. built a telescope to communicate with Venus, communicated with bees there in 1898 with his telescope, rebuilt another one, and then in 1926 he wrote a whole series of articles about the nature of bees and the structure of beehives, and recommended that human society pattern itself after the bees. But in the book is just more coincidences about the Fibonacci numbers with the planet Venus and with bees. For example, one thing is that the Earth and Venus in their orbit are always in a direct Fibonacci number ratio. That for every 8 orbits of Venus, because it's closer to the sun, there'll be exactly 5 of the Earth. And then whatever Fibonacci number is the next higher will always be for Venus, and the next lowest one will always be for the Earth. So I don't think that these things are just mere coincidences. But all
Very
these
good.
books, they are fully illustrated. There's over 100 photos throughout, and many of them in color.
That's very
I think
fascinating. And you can get them at Amazon, is that correct?
yes,
For our
they're
viewers?
available at Amazon.com, and you could even order a complete set at a discounted price.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to put the names of that in the description section. The names of your books. Can you make sure you send me the names of the books so we can have people search? They know
Yes, I will.
exactly.
And
But we'll do that when we're done.
Venus Rising, Rockets to Venus, and Cosmic Rays, Excellent Venus Adventure. I want to
this
share.
is the cover of the third book right there.
Okay. It's a
That's
little
a
close.
picture.
It's a
That's a
little.
picture of him and the woman, the Queen of Venus. Her name is Lady Orda.
Oh, cool. This is okay, that's good. That's a little bit better that it's okay. Sorry, Rob, what did you want to share with us? What
I
just
wanted to share that this device invented by Dr. Fred Bell, called the Andromedan Holographic Projector, has Fibonacci series there too.
wow.
This is a quantum flux resonator of the silver kind, but you can see etched into this is a Fibonacci spiral. And then, of course, you have the Sintamani nuclear receptor, which I'm launching now, but this is
Right.
Fibonacci one. So, and then, of course, the penultimate, or where everyone gets all of the math of the Fibonacci comes from, of course, is the keystone to modern mathematics, of course, is the pyramid. Pyramid, I wear it on my head, but the Fibonacci, another thing I wanted to share about that is that the Sirius rotation is keyed into 1.6 something. I'm not into the thing, but I think it's it's half of the Fibonacci. So there's some mathematical correlation
Yeah.
between Sirius and Earth. Ray, could you talk a little bit about that?
Is that the golden mean you're talking about there? Uh,
Yeah, I
Ray,
mean,
let me ask.
3.4.
Ray, is
Yeah.
that Ray? Is that where is that the golden mean at the Fibonacci at that point?
I'm not exactly sure, but there are a lot of connections between the Sirius star sector and our own. And there was some information that was given to me um, by Lady Ankara that I put in the Rockets to Venus,
Mm-hmm.
some detailed information about the Sirius star system. And it hadn't been verified anywhere on Earth. So when I got back, I checked everywhere I could find, including in China and different universities, at libraries and so forth, to see if I could find out information that would vindicate it. And I found it. So I put it in the Rockets to Venus.
Oh, wow. So these are really great books, folks. If you're doing research or you just want to learn, you just want to know, we'll have these names in the write-up section, write-up the description section of this video. We'll have the names of the books there. It's definitely something to research. But let me ask you this about That was fascinating about Tesla. I mean, I'm sure you have a lot more in there, and I can't wait to read it myself. But what was their understanding of what Earth was, what was going on here? I mean, clearly they had to know that there was a lot of suffering on this planet. People were not, I, like I would have a hard time believing we all agreed to be blown up and have our loved ones killed before. I mean, like, it's really horrible stuff that's happened here. What was their understanding? I mean, did they think we were just animals? Did they not realize? Did they know that we were all being, socially engineered and manipulated by these overlords these
Well,
oligarchs?
yes, they realize that we're going through a hard time, but they understand that we have a great potential. We have a divinity within us. Now on Venus, its cosmic evolution is 2 billion years in advance of the Earth. So life arose on Venus 2 billion years before it did on the Earth. So it was the first planet in the solar system to evolve life, and many peoples from different parts of the galaxy have come to Venus and contributed to its history as our own. But there's this great disparity in evolutionary development, both technological and spiritual. But I think that the Venusians are more worried about our lack of spiritual evolution, because we're developing this technology as we dip our toes into the shores of the cosmic ocean. And we represent a possible threat to carry that kind of technology and aggression to other worlds in our solar system and beyond. So naturally, they're worried about that because our spiritual maturity hasn't caught up yet with our technology. So in many ways, we're like a child playing with matches in a dynamite shack. And Venus being the closest planet to the Earth, the Venusians, they actually call themselves Sebasians, are much more concerned about what's going on this planet than on Mars or other worlds.
It's a very complicated process of, well, when they introduced religion, then, we stopped our spiritual development. That was it. It would kind of just, and so that was a problem. That was a big problem.
Oh, I agree. I agree with that. Helena Blavatsky also said as much. In one of the objects, that the first object of theosophy is that there being no religion higher than truth itself, but that we gain truth from many, many areas, from philosophy, from science, from psychology, not just religion or comparative religion, because we could argue, like many theologians do, about how many angels can stand on the head of a pin, but what does that affect our everyday life? So in that regard, the Venusians are much more holistic, because they take everything into consideration that can be taken into consideration.
Well, I hope that they understand that really the problem is those who seek power and have the power, become, I guess they become, consumed and enamored by the power, that they become greedy, that they, if this is supposed to be a free will zone, then, I mean, if we want to go travel to Venus, why shouldn't we be able to? It's not really free will if we can't come and go as we please. So in many ways, it is definitely a prison planet, and I tend to think that if human beings were just left to be human beings, we would be much further along. But we were interfered with by these, I would say, these darker, malevolent, uh, beings that have hijacked us. Basically, they have hijacked our evolution. I don't know if you would agree with that statement, but in a
Oh
sense.
yes,
Right?
I would agree with that, and that's why they're concerned, and they have to respect our sovereignty and our ability to grow and develop on our own, to come to our own self-realization about these important things.
It's very frustrating. I'm sure for you, it has been frustrating to try to. I don't know what it's like getting around a bridge table or a dinner table at the holiday time with you, but I'm sure that you can't really just sit down and have a conversation with anybody. That Rob knows this as well as I do. That how has this been? You've been doing this for such a long time, and you've had such access to such incredible information. um, do you see, I mean, you must see a change in time now. I mean, more people are waking up, more people are embracing this. You must notice a vibrational frequency shift going on, like a consciousness shift. Where do you see us right now, and in terms of increasing that, making that next step in our evolution?
Well, I have noticed that, and that's why there's so many light workers that are waking up as to who they are and why they're here, what their intention should be on this world, and not just to be self-serving. And one of the things that I found out was the more I would grow, and the more I would serve fellow men and women, the more I would grow. I work at In Touch and Concern. It's a United Way agency, and we provide free or affordable transportation to seniors, veterans, and persons with disabilities. So I help arrange transportation, and I make reassurance calls and try to engage myself in something that, even if it makes one soul a happier soul and have a better life, then I realize that, hey, I've accomplished something here in this incarnation. And that's the kind of thing that the Venusians that they would like to see, is where we can help one another to step up to that next plateau.
That's great. So out of that service to self and to service to others kind of mindset.
I'd like to say one thing to share. Another thing about Ray's book is he talk. You talk about, do they know what's going on? They've been intimately involved, and I've spoken with Ray for a long time. I'm so excited to bring him to the conference this summer, but because he has so much information, and I'm just learning so much about it. But he talks about the Victor One ship of Valiant Thor was named after a lady named Victoria. And maybe he can tell us the story, but they were secretly repelling a Saurian invasion of reptilians that were seeking to come here and do stuff. And, they weren't contacting the people in Greece or Rome or whatever the time period this was. But in one of the final battles that they had defeated them, the big mothership had engine problems and crash landed on Mount Olympus. So the whole story of the Roman or Greek gods, I mean, he's an expert in this, but came from these contacts, and they actually made a statue of the queen, and the generals were praying to her and giving these obligations and sacrifices, and she said, stop that. Raymond, what's the time period? Give Louise a little taste of how they do serve us without our knowledge, but they are protecting and seeing to it that we move forward. Share that story.
It's okay, right, Rob. You can co-host with me. It's okay.
Well, wherever there's smoke, there's fire. And of course, the Venusians demonstrating all these vast cosmic powers beyond the comprehension of human beings in the 4th century, Anno Domini of the 4th century AD. They were seen as gods, and they wanted to know. She wanted to Lady Victory, she wanted to let the humans know that they don't need to be worshipped, and that one day when they get their ship repaired, they were going to leave. And so she said, no, don't go forth in war and conquest of neighboring peoples and so forth, and and conquer in our name. God forbid that you do such a thing. And so this was the message, and the same message today is that they want us to know that they're our friends, that they're not our overlords or uh, our masters in anything except maybe a spiritual sense,
Well,
and that they're teachers and servants to us to help us along the way.
that's very good, because in this age now, Rob talked about that we're having like this soft contact or soft disclosure contact, and it's like, people would, think, well, gosh, if you really ever met someone from another planet, what would you do? I've just like, hey, it's like another friend from anywhere, from Bangladesh or from Australia. Come on over, let's talk. I don't know. I don't really see that. But I know people would feel like a little starstruck in a sense, and have that feeling like, or, like maybe they are godlike in a sense or whatever. But I'd be like, just asking them questions like I am asking all of you, I'd just be, bugging them, asking a lot of questions, but as an equal.
Yes,
As an equal.
as equals. They consider us to be their equals. We're all from the same infinite source, the same infinite creator. Um, and um, well, back a couple months ago, I did a series of articles called the Kenneth Arnold Files, because I got hold of the files from Kenneth Arnold, the one who started the whole flying saucer thing, when he saw 9 dish-shaped objects skimming like saucers across water over Mount Rainier in Washington State in the Cascades on the 24th of June of 1947. But he and his wife Doris were up until about 1953 or so, till George Adamski and Borderland Sciences Research and others, Meade Lane and others came along. He was the go-to person for flying saucer reports, and he traveled all over the western states and investigated these reports and kept voluminous material about his research. And I found the instances where the emphasis was on landed Venusian craft and the contacts with Venusian that were even pre-Adamski. And so I wrote a series of articles about that. And these Venusians were just coming to Earth. They were on vacation. And the pilot of the excursion vessel that landed on the Pacific coast up in Washington on the sandy shore there, she invited this gentleman who was a lumberjack, like a part-time lumberjack, to come on board the spacecraft, and they became friends, and introduced him to. He was introduced to all the Venusians, and she was, essentially, when we would take children on a field trip, how they would be on a bus and everything, and she was just kind of supervising them, and they were playing in the water, and so they're very very much like us in many respects.
Oh, some people get to have all the fun, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, I did a whole series of articles there about vacationing Venusians, about how they like our planet. So we have such a beautiful ecology here, and beautiful beaches, and lovely deserts, and mountains, and mountain lakes, and it's just so wonderful here that Venusians and other star people come here all the time to be on vacation. And then
Wow.
that also had another one investigated by Kenneth Arnold where they came down in the sequoias. And they met lots of people there and were appearing as orbs over these mountains. And this one Venusian was a horseman, equestrian, and he was showed up in some like garb from the 19th century, horse riding gear, and came and talked to came down from a mountain with all these lights, and came down and talked to these fishermen that were going to a mountain lake, and just a lot of amazing information there.
So if people want to, I mean, is there some plan, I guess this is why the other two, Rob, you talk about on your website the story of these two Venusians who have come, these two ladies. Is this the age of soft contact, so to speak, or
Well, when I say
explain
soft
this?
disclosure, I mean what the government is allowing, like this little bit piece by piece. And of course, we're working from the other end, and I'll have to say with the space people, it's a gentle disclosure because they're very conscious and know how everything's manipulated here. But they're always a bastion or an oasis of calm presence. They're very aware. They have telepathic communication with ships that are monitoring the thoughts of peoples around them. And they do have a tight security. But you go back to the 40s, and yes, they were landing openly and having those types of things going on. So what's taking place with Raymond's thing, and I think it's very cool because we have Omnic declaring she's Venusian. We have Valiant Thor. We found out he was a Venusian. You know, Howard Menger, I have a relationship with him, and Raymond did as well. And Long John Nebel, the original, coast to coast and kind of truth storytellers of the 40s had that relationship. So Valiant Thor was not really known, but we see the pictures. I saw the woman in blonde hair next to Valiant Thor in the same row at Frank Strange's Inner Circle meeting. And I got to talk to her, and she just was smiling and had a radiant, kind of like a cat got your tongue. She had revealed herself to me. Everyone else, I don't think anyone else noticed. And I was like, oh my God, that's her. And she's like, letting me know that she was. So it's very calm and natural. And when they landed in Pennsylvania in June last year, it was to help launch Raymond's new book. Now, what we haven't gotten into is that Orthon, and we spoke about this, was a woman, and this is revealed through Ray, that George Adamski, and she said, look, tell them I'm a man because they can't accept that a woman would be making first contact. But she has since that time, she has become the queen, literally kind of like the queen bee of Venus. And her association with Ray allowed Ray to have this wonderful experience where a confirmation of his work was announced when these two women beamed down. And, let's go ahead and, I'll get on here and just show I want to share the screen here and show this picture, and then you can ask Ray about it. But on my website here, we go into and this is where you can find a lot of Raymond's articles I've been posting, folks. If you want to hear some of his beautiful stuff, it's on the Victor of Light blog here, but it's taking a little time to load. But the story is, and Raymond can go into this, but I thought it's so exciting because, we have these other pictures of them in the 50s, and we revealed later these giant rock pictures and other pictures in Raymond's book that you look in and you find that they have been photographed, and we go, they were actually photographed and realized. But when you go into
Are you looking for those two photos? The
Yeah,
photos
you
of
have
the women there? Yeah, I do.
Okay, let me get out of here, and
Okay.
I wanted to share that, but it's on the Victory of Light blog, so I wanted
Yeah.
people to see that I stopped sharing.
Yeah.
But
Okay. I'll go pull it up.
they landed in a beam of light in the forest, and some guy had noticed them and go, wait a minute. He goes, who are you? Where are you from? And why are you here?
Mhm.
And these two beautiful women, um, and there's a whole story to them in this article, and I don't know if you want to go into this, but they basically said, we're from Venus, when we're here to congratulate Cosmic Ray on the release of his 2 books, Rockets to Venus and Cosmic Ray's Excellent Adventure.
Okay.
And they were wearing these raspberry berets with gold E pins, and they announced they're from Venus. So this is an unprecedented new level of contact that's a harbinger for all of us to, like we said, look, just to realize that they're normal people like Omnek, that they are warm, they have good intent, and we can meet them without worshiping them as gods, although you mentioned we look at them as godlike, and what the Venusians would like is for us all to look at each other as godlike. So Raymond can share. You can see them in the background there. Raymond, why don't you go ahead and share the information. The better picture of them is a little higher up.
Yeah. Let's see. A little high. Oh, there they are. There they are.
Yeah.
Okay, they announced their names as Lady Columba, that's the one that you see on the left, and then Lady Aurora on the right. And she was in India once upon a time, born there in 1880 during the time of the British Raj. And the one on the left, Lady Columba, was born in 1902 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And she became an esoteric painter and a writer, and she was involved with the Christian socialist movement during the Great Depression, and went to India and became involved with the struggle for India's independence, where she met Lady Aurora, who had been herself um, encountered a Venusian in the Himalayas. She's from Rishikesh, in the foothills of the Himalayas on the India side, from Nepal, and was a tour guide and tended to somebody who had some wounds, and it turned out that he was a Venusian, so she became a student of his and went to Venus, and then she in turn taught Lady Columba, and then Lady Columba was a friend and associate of Truman Bethurum, who was a contactee in the 1950s in California. And so I have a lot of original material from her and from Truman Bethurum, which I'm going to introduce that people can see for themselves at the Mount Shasta conference this coming summer.
I'd like to share a little more there. What happened was Lady Columba, the one on the left, passed away, I think, in 1998. She was quite old, and she had been learning and having contacts and of these council meetings and during her life. And before she passed away, I think I mentioned this to you maybe in another radio show, Venusian Master came, took her DNA and blood, downloaded her memories, and when she passed over, she found herself on the moon. And now we see her in her resurrected form. And the other woman was taken up to Venus and translated into like higher consciousness beings. So they're both originally from Earth, but now they work from Venus in this mission. So the uniqueness of this is that they came down and she actually handed Ray a book she wrote.
Did she?
Yes, and it has all of her original artwork. There's some artwork that you could see of hers that is also at the University of Arizona at Tucson. That shows the resurrection process that takes place at a facility on the moon base Clarion on the far side of the moon, and it's a beautiful painting, and
Wow.
I'll have a replica of that to show, as well as the original material, new material by her.
What about aging? And they obviously look quite young. And what is what? How do the Venusians? What's the process of healing and aging and so forth? There, could you give us some
Well,
insight into that?
and in a natural life. In a natural life, Venusians can live for up to like 1,000 years. In our physical reality, in fifth dimensional uh, uh, Venusians, I don't think that they need to uh, incarnate anymore. They're at the realm of angels.
I see. But what do they do to keep? Do they meditate? Is there a process they go through? Is there something that specific that they eat that keeps them so youthful? You know, they're very youthful.
Well, of course, Venus has a much denser atmosphere than the Earth, and so the amount of radiation that reaches the surface is not quite as intense as here on the Earth, where the ozone layer can only catch so much. Once upon a time, here on Earth, we had a much thicker atmosphere, but it diminished following the antediluvian age.
If they were to, in terms of our history, now this is your area of expertise also, what do you think is the most fascinating thing about our history that they taught you that we didn't know, that we didn't previously know?
Well, they have followed our course of evolution, and uh, there has been intervention by other alien species throughout human history that have interfered here, but now we have to deal with with what we are. Although we can follow the example of the Venusians and steer our civilization on a course of development. I know there's a Russian scientist, Kardashev, I think his name is, and he actually developed a scale for rating interplanetary civilizations by the kind of energy that they utilize. And we're still at the very lowest level, but we're about to progress beyond that to the next highest level, which would be an integrated planetary energy grid. And then from there, it would be a solar energy grid, and then to an intergalactic one, and then to one and then ultimately to one that transcends time and space into like a quantum type civilization.
Okay, so we're about to, what about these changes that we're going through right now? And if you could, it looks like that I'm losing part of your image on the computer. I don't, yeah, that would be better if you could set up a little bit more. Thanks. Okay, where are we in terms of this event that's supposed to happen, or do they give you any indication about this vibrational frequency shift that we're supposed to be experiencing? Is it a very slow, step-by-step process, or are we supposed to have, I think at some point, a much more, it's supposed to be a large, major frequency shift?
Oh yes, well we're headed to what might be called an epiphany of consciousness as more and more people begin to realize how interconnected that we are, not only on this world but in the universe at large, and not just with the human species, but with all the other creatures that we share our planet with. Then we'll begin to uh, be ready and be seen to be ready to enter into this galactic federation that's out there.
I think many of us are ready.
Oh
Right, Rob?
yes, there
I
are
think
a
there's,
good many that are ready, and many more that are becoming ready every day. And then, in fact, that's part of our job as light workers here, is to bring this revolution of consciousness about. But
okay, it's a
to take
revolutionary.
to kick it up to the next level, where we're not just talking about it, but where we're building communities and helping one another in very real and tangible ways.
Okay, so there has to be some major shifts going on the planet in order to allow this to happen. We have to have the control on this planet has to end in terms of the, censoring patents, censoring, other types of healing technology aside from the free energy, um, or over unity, however you describe it, type energy. So okay, the very things that Nikola Tesla was trying to bring to us that were censored by J.P. Morgan and et al. Um, what is this? Are we getting help to do this? Because many of us want, many of us are ready to. Look, I mean, I was flying in a plane and I'm looking down at the cars and they were like ants. And they really are. I mean, it's like we're really behind. Like the cars have to go. I mean, we are ready for better technology, teleportation, UFO saucers. We need better transportation. We need better healing. It's like enough with the combustible engines. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
yes. Well, there are Venusians that are working, and they're living and working among us and helping in many ways that go undetected and unnoticed. But working in the scientific community at universities around the world, and working in various organizations to promote the benefit of humankind overall, and help prepare us.
okay.
But it's like it's like when you have a big obstacle, like you have a seawall that's out beyond the pier, and it's a big concrete barrier, steel and concrete,
Yep.
or iron and concrete. But the ocean is lapping against it every few seconds, the waves of the ocean, and it won't take pretty long before it wears the whole thing down. And
Right.
that's pretty much what's happening now. And it's a subtle kind of change. It's not going to happen overnight
Mhm.
like a big bang explosion, but it's happening.
That's wonderful. And let me just ask you, is there a monetary system? Do they use money on Venus?
No, they don't use money
So,
because they consider that that wealth is determined by a degree of happiness, and they actually have a department of happiness on Venus.
oh, I love it. That's wonderful. The Department of Happiness. Isn't that
Yeah,
wonderful?
you just let them know what will make you happy, and they'll work to do everything they can to fulfill it.
I think we're
It's
on the
kind of
wrong
like that
planet.
movie. Remember
I
that movie
guess.
with Robin Williams where he could just paint anything just with his imagination?
Uh-huh.
What dreams
That's
become?
kind of how it is.
Say that, Rob.
The movie was called What Dreams May Come. You know, I wanted to say the free energy is key, and that's one of the silence groups. We've already have that energy. It's a matter of letting the world needs to recognize that the seawall's there, who built it, that it's a limitation, and all we have to do is walk out on the pier, jump in, step up on the seawall, and go into the ocean of happiness. But so however this reveals, there may be a certain point of floodgate opening when the real information can come forward to the people. And that, you know, that's a whole psychology of the event and stuff, but definitely they are concerned, and they're not going to be, you know, enabling, and they haven't. Valiant Thor and Dr. Frank Strange has said clearly, we're not going to enable your government with weapons and technology that they would use against the people or take in a hostile way to other planets. So there is a police force type activity that is actually reaching out in areas behind the scenes, because officially it can't happen. So those intelligent, awake, open individuals are being contacted surreptitiously by Venusians to influence their thinking towards free will decisions of a better way, as well as in certain cases, you know, direct contact with you know, more elevated contacts like Raymond that are, you know, ready to just have the physical contact and not freak out and have the experiences that he's had, and to share the information. So here we have another wonderful Earth ambassador of the Venusians, like Dr. Frank Louis, of a very a pure soul caliber, that's just able to let this information out, and from his experience and knowledge, people are going to sense the truth of what he's sharing. And I'm so happy that you're working.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Rob. I didn't really consider myself to be an ambassador, but more I felt that I was selected to do this, write these books in the capacity of a historian. I didn't get my my PhD in history until very late in life, just a few years before I actually retired. But I felt that that's where life was leading me. That's what I needed to do, was to become a historian and learn the skills of a historian and a researcher to compile this information about Venus, because we have all these books and information about the history of other countries and peoples here on Earth, but none about our closest planetary neighbors.
That's very well said. And I have to say, you know, it's time. It's just time. And we have to stop the government cover-up and censorship. They're only doing it so that they can get an unfair advantage and utilize. Well, what about commerce? Let me just go back for a minute, because I want to talk a little bit more about, so how do people eat, and how do they sustain themselves then if they don't use money? What is the system set up as over there?
The system is very it's very utopian, where they channel people's abilities into the areas that they feel most adequate, and where they have the most interest, and then everything balances out. So the government there will let people know, or let them know that they where they have a need for research, or where they need workers in certain areas, and then they will just fill that, and they live in rather communal type settlements.
Communal. And what do they eat?
Oh yes, they eat, and when they're on Earth, they eat our foods, but up there they eat largely fruits and vegetables for the most part, grains.
And you said
In
that the
fact,
women are telepathic, but do they have a particular language?
Oh yes, they have a language, and um,
Is it like
there's
an
of
Earth
course there are
language? Sorry.
many Venusians that are what I call naturalized Venusians because they came from the Earth originally.
Oh, okay.
They may be some may have been Venusian souls that have incarnated on the Earth plane, and they've completed their cycle of incarnations, and they're returning to Venus. But others have merited uh, the right to be translated to the planet Venus, like Annalise Guerin.
I see. So it's like a, is it, what is the name of that language? Do you have a name of that for that?
Oh yes, it's Abasian.
Could you spell that?
Abejan.
They call their planet Abajar, or it means people of the bees, right?
Yes, Abahar. It's the planet of the bees.
Planet of the bees, yeah.
Wow, that is so cool. It's time to start learning about our cosmic neighbors for sure. And I think that they'll find out that most human beings really are very loving, warm people. When they're not mind controlled.
Yes.
Yes, right. So that sounds wonderful, and it really does. It's time for those chains, Rob. It's time for those chains of bondage to be broken and allow us to, learn that our history. Yes, people are going to be angry, um, and I don't know if there's going to be a truth and reconciliation process. I think President Trump is in the process, is involved in doing his mission, his job, whatever it is he's doing here. Do the Venusians have any opinion about President Trump?
um,
We, we've talked about that.
well,
He,
they're not
Hold on a second.
big fans of him for the most part.
right. There may be certain actions that are going on there, but I think one of the things that we can get from the Venusian and the type of consciousness that Valiant Thor is they don't push against the negativity. They enhance and increase the positivity. They won't.
Right. They smother it with love.
Yeah, you don't fight against the system, and these bad people hopefully will be arrested, and people will do it. But it's the consciousness has to change within the individual. It's not so.
Yes.
So Raymond and I were talking, and he said he was talking about Bob Marley's things. You have to free your mind from mental slavery because he likes pop cultural references. He's really into Lady Gaga too. But I said, well, I was thinking of the Beatles. The movement you need is on your shoulder. So it's a responsibility.
Well, politically,
Yeah.
I did put a comment in there about the Venusian. They don't like to interfere in our political because that's our self-determination there. But I did say that for the most part, they look at the differences between Republicans and Democrats, what the difference is between two dimes and two nickels and a dime.
Exactly.
There's not much difference there.
Exactly. But I mean, it's what we have, and like it or not, it's where we are. So certainly, I think the Venusians would prefer Trump over Hillary. I think that would be safe to say. Um, but I don't want to speak for them. I mean, would that be their opinion? Because it is what we have at the moment. So we can't just change overnight, like you said. It's a process we have to work through. Self-determination. People have to make a decision as to what kind of political system we even want here, and that I think we have way too much government, But would they have preferred
Yes,
Hillary? Is that what you're saying, or no? That's not what you're saying.
Well, they would.
no, I'm just saying that we still have a long way to grow, and we're evolving and developing the kind of systems that will best adapt to our situation as we head further into the 21st century.
I think there needs to be more like humans on these councils who are not part of the political process but can see it objectively from the outside, and whose impact the present, political system, who feels that impact of the present political system and the errors of the system and where the system's trying to do right. Like, for instance, commerce had good intentions, but it's what happened with the process of commerce that went awry and caused a lot of problems. People who misuse things that were used originally for good intentions, just like the intervention from some of the, like, Valiant Thor, in other words, and other, from the research I've done and the interviews I've done, there were other races that tried to bring positive technology here, which ended up being weaponized. So I understand what you're saying, but I don't really feel that the people who are running the earth in any way represent me. But I'm stuck here. We're all stuck here, whether we like it or not. We can't leave. We can't, choose to. I guess what you can do is we can work on our spirituality so we can individually ascend, things of that nature. Um, I guess that's the only choice. Is that how you see it?
I'd like
Um,
to talk about the seawall there. If the government, as with a in the
A little internet issue, Rob. Hang on a second. It's hopefully.
level uh, consciousness, commerce is a good thing, but people have become greedy and they do not understand the laws of nature and the universe. So once the true nature of laws and the relationship of the soul and how we're connected on a quantum level, and the people realize that, they can't treat each other in we, they, me, I'm the king of the heap. And what we have here is, for whatever reason, manipulation, alien invasion, interference, the human consciousness level is gotten to the point where there's a few people who control the opening of the floodgates of the wall to allow the grand ocean in. So use Ray's metaphor, we have to realize we don't have to go up and fight those people. We have to just, in our minds, in our abilities to work together, to just transcend and ignore that system. We have to stop partaking in it, and in the culture of violence and military and all of the manipulation that's been done. So I think, again, it comes back to the individual's responsibility to realize that, and to know that this process of erosion of the power structure and control is imminent. And that they have of all this control is really the Wizard of Oz behind the screen.
That's what it is. It's the Wizard of Oz. Ray, did you want to comment on that? I mean, I didn't want to. It's just like, what are the options? Like, there's people who are
yes, I
ready,
think
really ready in advance, who really want to,
I think the answer is in transforming the world one individual at a time. The world won't be transformed until we transform ourselves, and then by simple acts of kindness, like Gandhi said, one simple act of kindness is worth more than 1,000 prayers. And so this is the way to go. And then, as people realize that money and power are these are things that trap us in this reality, but really they're just Maya. They're just pure illusion, and that's the because let's say that you achieve power in a country and you're a dictator and you're ruling over all these people, then your soul is in chains by all those people, and you have all this immense responsibility. And it's just it's like Marley's ghost in the Christmas Carol. You walk through life with all of that that karma. That's what money and power does. So by just being kind to one another and stepping out of that mess, stepping out of that rat race, that's how we transcend it.
That's beautiful, and this is really kind of a really great stopping point here because we're at our maximum amount of time, and this has just gone by so quickly, and it's so fascinating. I think, it's just we kept turning corners that just led to another fascinating section, and I can't wait. I'm very excited. I really, I hope you come back and do another Goldfish report with us at some time
Well, thank you, Louisa. I'd be very honored to do that.
with my
Thank you so
co-host
much.
Rob.
Yeah,
Only come,
um,
only if Rob co-hosts with me.
okay,
Oh,
well,
definitely,
Okay.
definitely. And Rob, thank you so much for introducing me to Louisa. I really appreciate that, and it's been a great honor and blessings to both of you and all the listeners and viewers.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you and to have this really wonderful opportunity to learn so much about Venus and about your role in, like Rob said, as an ambassador. I definitely see you as an ambassador, a historian ambassador, if you will. But Rob, thank you so much. And Rob, it's so appropriate for you to call this From Venus with Love, your conference. It's just so perfect. And I do have a very special. I wanted to know if. Let me just first ask Rob if you would lead us out with the Ring of Fire. But before we do that, I'd like to ask Ray if he had any other final thoughts, any questions I didn't ask, anything we didn't cover that you wanted to cover before we close out.
Well, let's let the light of Venus shine as the guiding star for all of us in attaining all of our dreams and living those dreams.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's very beautiful. Rob, would you like to share the Ring of Fire with everyone before we
I,
close out?
I certainly will, and I'll maybe I can make that a post so people can have them as they're on my inner circle there. And the conference this summer, of course, I've invited you to come. I want you to give a presentation maybe the musical thing we talked about, but I hope you can come this summer and make it tear yourself away. And I'd like to again say, folks, Louisa works very hard. She has had her YouTube hacked down and stuff, but this still gets out to you. And if you can support her somehow with some donations, because she works really hard. And I always want to say that because I know how much time and effort that she puts here. And it's important. And, you can check out Ray's stuff and then, of course, the conference on my site. But the Ring of Fire prayers are Venusian given to Dr. Frank Strange's. They have 3 Ring of Fire prayers. And I'm going to give the last Ring of Fire or the Inner Ring of Fire, which is one of my favorites. And this doesn't have to be religious for you. This is a powerful invocation of your own spiritual self, your own I am presence, in declaring to the universe the truth of what you want in your life, if you so desire. And it goes like this: Eternal Mother, Father, God, Creator of the universe, hear this hour my earnest prayer. Anoint my eyes, my ears, my lips, and my heart with your divine inner flame of fire. Provide me now with perfect health, abundance, and longevity. Lord, revitalize and redirect my energies into your divine service. And touch me now with your divine inner flame of fire and cause me to be the perfect master that you intend me to be. In the blessed name of all that is, so be it, so it is done, I am.
So be it. Thank you so much, Rob. That was beautiful. And I do have a very special connection to this. We have a mutual friend who asked me to write the music for it because that is my background, classical musician. I have a classical music training. And so I did. And it is really very beautiful, I have to say. And we are hoping to premiere this song. It's like a meditation prayer, this Ring of Fire at Rob's conference. I think I'm going to get it there, come hell or high water.
Well, I'm hoping Harold will be there too. Our friend who inspired you to do that. Thank you again for having us on the show. And Raymond can come back. I mean, he's got so many stories. I was just bursting to kind of let him tell, but
Sure.
You'll hear more.
It's a pleasure, Rob. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing Raymond to our viewers and you know, for us to get to know him and get to experience a little bit of what he's experienced through him vicariously. This is really wonderful stuff. And we only, you know, I'm sitting here wishing like, wow, why don't they contact me? You know, that'd be a perfect person to contact. I'm just like, you know, beam me up. I'm ready. Just, you know, but, you know, let's one step at a time. I mean, some of us are ready. Okay. So thank you so much, Rob. It was a pleasure. Good to see you. I will be back in touch with you. Raymond, what a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's a
You are
pleasure,
a friend of the
Louisa.
GoldFish Report. Thank you. And
Thank you so much.
I look forward to you coming back.
I definitely will look forward to see you again.
All right. Thank you so much. And for our viewers, I wanted to remind you all that here we go. I'm going to bring up our pages here so that you can remember where to find us, because we have been dancing around a little bit because of YouTube's new censorship, sadly. But we are also on Patreon. You can find our videos on Patreon. You can also go to BitChute. And if you look at the logo here, this is the corner BitChute. This is the GoldFish Report channel here on BitChute with our reports. We will have our archive up soon. Well, not soon. It will take a little while. Soon, that was relative. But I mean, it will be up. It's a very long process. We've got 200 reports to re-upload. They take a long time to upload these videos, so it will take some time. And of course, you all know that you can go to thegoldfishreport.com, and when you do, you'll find all of our links there anyway. You also know about our Facebook page, which is a news page, which I'm going to share with you right now, just so our viewers remember where to find us. And of course, where that you can find our reports. It's a very slow internet connection today. So hang on, just bear with me and I'll show you the page as soon as it pulls up. But, well, you know where to go. It's the GoldFish Report on Facebook. Okay, here we go. It's going to load any second now. It's quite slow. Yeah, maybe I should rethink that. So if it does come up, I will share it. It's quite slow. So, folks, I want to thank you again, Ray. It was a pleasure. Rob, it was a pleasure. I will see you soon. I will speak to you soon. And all of the links, we're going to have the names of the books in the description section of the video. And, of course, our links are also going to be there as well as Rob's and Rob's website and his link to this Shasta Summer Conference. So it's not going to load, so forget about it. It's very it's not cooperating. But that's it. This concludes. Thank you so much for viewing, and this concludes. We'll see you next time. This concludes this edition of the GoldFish Report.
Thanks, Larissa.
Thank you all.